This is the Baby Angel Geronimo Manifesto platform on which we are broadcasting the Khoodeelaar television channel at 09:30 UK time and 08. Let's check the time again, just to be sure. So we're 08. And today's Fleet Street, London, so-called newspapers include, of course, two promotions, or maybe three promotions for Liz Truss. She proved absolutely unfit for purpose. She was a disaster. That's not saying too much, because every conservative incumbent is a disaster for the country. The fact that every conservative government is a disaster for the country, and yet the Conservative Party remains in power for as long as it does, is not a credit to it. It's a discredit to the other political parties which claim to be the Conservatives' rivals. The political murderer of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, and his Rachel racist Reeves. These criminals are responsible for the continuation of the Conservatives in post in power. As we speak on the 13th of April 2024. Now, in the Times, they've got a follow-up. I think this is the third follow-up in the Times about the Harold Wilson affair with Janet Hewlett Davis, who has died in October, this last October, aged 85 or 82. I'll check that again as well. And it reports, the Times reports that Hewlett Davis left £10,000 to the Labour Party from her estate of just over £500,000. It seems that Janet Hewlett Davis, despite the affair with Harold Wilson, was quite a decent individual. Everything about her that has been revealed through Joe Haynes shows that she's somebody that didn't brag like Marcia Falkbender, and she made sure that her affair with Harold Wilson remained a secret, as it should have been. The affair between Wilson and Hewlett Davis should have been allowed to remain a secret. And what a contrast. There was no, I mean, the Times makes the point that that affair would have been grabbed hold of by the very curious confidentiality. Now, that is also the first time the picture of Hewlett Davis walking in the grounds of Chequers, the official residence of the UK Prime Minister. It's a rare publication of the picture. This is the first time that Hewlett Davis is seen along with Harold Wilson. Now there is a stupid brag. The heading in the Times says, "Unlike Corbyn, I would press nuclear button," says Starmer. Now here is a very serious explanation. What does he mean? It's There is this item on the Times, Rupert Murdoch Times, which is based on Liz Truss's latest desperate self-promotion, so-called memoir. And I'll correct the period she was incumbent in, now number Downing Street 4. I'm just checking on the page where this item is. Yeah, she says, this is the heading on page 14 of the Times today, Saturday, the 13th of April 2024. I felt like a prisoner in flea-infested Downing Street flat, claims Truss. Now imagine that. I mean, for the duration of what was it, 3 or 4 years that the congenital liar Boris Johnson was in post as the Prime Minister. And in those years, he generated about 1,000 different stories. The overwhelming majority of those stories concerned his infidelity, his dishonesty, his greed, his corruption, and his stupidity. Now, in the Eye newspaper, the Weekend Eye, the conservative journalist Katie Bowles is promoting Liz Truss, that she is coming back and she is preparing for another leadership bid. How to contrast that with this? I felt like a prisoner in flea-infested Downing Street flat. I mean, if Downing Street was flea-infested, what does it say about the United Kingdom? The imperial country? The country populated by a no substance whatsoever. How dare he? Sense of superiority to the people of the subcontinent, which even in the 19th century exceeded the combined population of Western Europe. But he did say what he did say. He said that the people should be brainwashed into learning and speaking and using English, which would mean that they would look brown on the outside and English on the inside. The only brown on the outside and English on the inside that turned out to be approximately what Macaulay predicted was Niraj Chaudhary. Niraj Chaudhary, born in what is Bangladesh, Mymensingh, was a disgrace. I mean, the autobiography of an unknown Indian, which I bought in Calcutta, and I was absolutely stunned by the stupidity. I mean, the cover of this man's stupidity, cover as being knowledgeable and superior in knowledge and in learning and learned, was the fact that he was admiring the imperialists and he was denouncing people of all faiths and all ethnicities right across the subcontinent. Autobiography of an unknown Indian launched this moron into the sphere where his masters and mistresses adopted him as the long awaited mental slave that Macaulay had promised. The fact that it wasn't masses and masses and masses of Indians defined in pre 1947 geography, but only one Niraj Chaudhary should not be overlooked. The fact that it was only him showed that Macaulay could not be more wrong. This was a moron, Niraj Chaudhary, that had nothing but loathing for himself, his family, his background, etc., etc., etc. I mean, contrast to Niraj Chaudhary is, of course, Madhusudan Datta. Datta was, of course, when he was in school, he was absolutely brainwashed by himself. Michael Madhusudan, Michael he called himself. And it took him decades of traveling in England and France before he realized that his mental slavery was absolutely depraved. So he disowned the mental slavery and disowned the Europeans. They won't even publish his English language poetry that he wrote while in England or he wrote while he was in Europe. So he decided to write the epic poem Meghnad Bodh Kaব্য. I read about Madhusudan Datta in Dhaka Dakkin, in Silot, in the early 1960s, when I was attending the Dhaka Dakkin High School. Well, it wasn't Dhaka Dakkin High School, it was Dottorail High School still. And their teacher was Kirod Chandra Purkasto from Tilfara. And the deputy headmaster was Lolaimia. These two gave me identical marks in English and Bangla in the exams. Amazing. Exactly identical marks they gave me. So if Liz Truss felt like a prisoner in flea-infested Downing Street, what the fuck is she doing? Building herself up again to return to the flea-infested flat in Downing Street and become a prisoner again. That actually is a kind of tale of the decline of empire. Really, truly decline, because despite the fact that the consulted liar, Boris Johnson, is telling American audiences that the USA and the West should arm Ukraine. Of course, press the nuclear button. There is hardly any defense capability left to actually compare with the defense capabilities that Vladimir Putin has been showing. Now, going to the 1980s, I created Jeremy Paxman. That is to say, until I intervened, the BBC had him just as another presenters. But because of his racist comment in what was then the nationwide program, in which he condemned the black youths convicted of sexual assaults on white girls. It's not the sexual assault that I was kind of in denial of. What I was doing was the language that Paxman used was racist against those. So I did a lengthy analytical piece about Paxman, and I published this in the magazine that I published, Black Parents Journal. And the BBC responded by creating him as a saint. Now, this racist fucker was unheard of in terms of being a celebrity. But as soon as I gave him a comprehensive exposure, they decided to back him. And the Listener magazine, which was then controlled by the BBC, devoted a cover story hero worshipping Jeremy Paxman. So the cult of Paxman was born in direct response to me condemning the racist Paxman. So in the Times today, on page 11 of the Times, Paxman, Parkinson's makes you wish you weren't born. That is obviously an empirical confession. After he became diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, he must have experienced all kinds of extreme disappointments in various things that he cannot do anymore after the onset of Parkinson's. But imagine this heading: Parkinson's makes you wish you weren't born. Can you imagine Paxman saying the same thing about being impelled by racist prejudice and hatred makes you wish you were not born a white racist? It would be a much awaited, much overdue alternative. And there is the other picture, other story about the London Metropolitan Police in the news in the Times on page 9 of the same Times, about this woman that was murdered in 1970, Muriel McKay. Muriel McKay, according to these reports, was murdered by the brothers from Trinidad. Sounds like one is Nizamuddin Hussain and his brother, what's his name? Patrick or what? So the family of Miss McKay have issued an ultimatum to the London Metropolitan Police. The family of Muriel McKay have told the Metropolitan Police they will sue the owner of the farm on which they believe she is buried if the Metropolitan Police does not search the land. The Metropolitan Police is deciding whether to dig at the site. For Nizamuddin Hussain, Mrs. McKay's killer claims to have buried her in 1970. Mrs. McKay's daughter and grandson have written to the London Metropolitan Police asking for an update since Metropolitan Police officers flew to Trinidad last month to interview Hussain about the location of her remains. The owner of the farm has said he would allow the land in Stocking, Pelham, Hertfordshire, to be searched only if the police asked to do so. Hussain and his older brother, Arthur, were convicted of killing Mrs. McKay, 55, during a bungled kidnapping in December 1969, after they mistook her for Anna Murdoch, then the wife of Rupert Murdoch, the former chairman of News Corporation, the ultimate owner of the Times newspaper. At the time of their trial, signed a sworn affidavit confirming the location of the body, telling them he wanted his conscience to be clear. About the continuing decline of the imperialist British state, British power. And he's, of course, joining the congenital liar Boris Johnson, who is kind of touring the USA and showing that he is more effective than David Cameron. There is a piece about the equality legislation by the Times' legal editor, Jonathan Amis. The heading is Offering Seat to Older Staff Risks Discrimination. It's a weird piece. I'll come to that in a minute. And apparently the Twiggy, the 1960s British model, reveals that at the height of her fame, she was traveling in a cab in New York, and she noticed that the cab driver was looking at her through his mirror. And then she asked her, "Are you that girl from England?" And she said, "Yes." To which the taxi driver said, "You are not, you are no Marilyn Monroe, are you?" These are the bizarre things that happen. Now there is this main item on the Times about Times front page, the leader. Leader item is about Angela Rayner, which continues as a news feature on page 5, which says the taxing conundrum of Rayner's council house. Angela Rayner made a profit of £48,500 from the home she bought under Right to Buy, the flagship Tory housing policy that Margaret Thatcher introduced. Years later, the transaction is at the center of a storm that involves investigations by the local council and now the police. She bought a £105,000 house in Stockport from the council for £79,000 with the help of a 25% discount. When the two-bedroom property was sold later, 8 years later, in 2015, it was worth £127,000, netting her £48,500. Greater Manchester Police's decision to investigate what happened is the most significant update since an unauthorized biography revealed her claim that she lived apart from her husband for 5 years of their marriage. The Labour leader supporters had relied on the police's pre-investigation assessment that no crime had been committed to beat down opponents. The matter has now reopened thanks to an intervention from the Conservative Party's Deputy Chairman, James Daly, who complained that officers had failed to look at the electoral roll, deeds, and other relevant documents or interview her neighbors. So this is a long story about that. And the Times' analysis But the conservatives are kind of targeting Reina because they think that she is a softer target to crush and undermine the Labour Party, which is still way ahead in the polls, way ahead of the Conservatives. Now, the Satan Rushdie features in another promotion for another book, in which he says, is titled Knife Meditations After an Attempted Murder. Rushdie, 76, recalls, in the corner of my right eye, the last thing my right eye would ever see, there is a review of a book by an Indian writer called Al Pasha, Incarcerations, BK 16 and the Search for Democracy in India, published by William Collins at £30. And it's a review by some Indian called Pratinab Anil. And the subheading is, this timely study reveals how India's strongman leader is stifling dissent. Well, this is a book by an Indian woman and a review by an Indian. But the Times is lying because every single day in India for the last 10 years, since 2014, when the fascist BJP, fronted by the fascist Modi, has been in power, every day in India there are violations, severe violations of human rights, of democracy, and all the rest of it. And increasingly, the Hindutva agenda is getting consolidated, and the media is completely dead. Now, there is nothing stopping any of that from being reported by the Western media, which chooses not to report. So, this book, and the heading is India, a Democracy in Name Only. This is a completely false heading. It's not a democracy at all, even not in name. India is the biggest fascist, is under the biggest fascist regime anywhere in the world. And everyone in the West who pretends to be a supporter of democracy is being irresponsible by colluding by silence. Shall be talking about all of these more in later editions